The Vrexani research station orbited a dead moon, which seemed fitting given that everything interesting here had already expired from boredom. Dr. Kethamore adjusted his 12 sensory stalks for the 14th time in as many minutes, watching the human through reinforced transplex that could theoretically withstand a plasma cannon. Theoretically being the operative word when dealing with what the galactic community had deemed the most efficient killing machine evolution had ever bothered to produce. The human sat in a chair. That was it. Just sitting. No frothing at the mouth, no supernatural displays of berserker fury, no attempt to bite through the restraints with those allegedly bone-crushing mandibles. The creature looked almost bored. Fascinating, muttered Doctor. Yelana, her crystalline carapace chiming softly as she made notes. Subject displays remarkable emotional suppression. Perhaps this is the precursor to the legendary rage state. Kethamore's eye stalks swiveled toward his colleague. According to the hegemony's xenobiological profile, humans enter combat trance within 3.7 minutes of captivity. This one has been secured for 6 hours. Maybe it's broken, offered junior researcher Plax, whose youth showed in his eagerness to poke dangerous things with metaphorical sticks. The human's head turned toward the observation window, and Kethamore instinctively stepped back. The creature's binocular vision was unsettling enough when viewed through recordings, but experiencing it firsthand felt like being examined by a particularly unimpressed deity. "I can hear you," the human said, voice carrying easily through the audio pickup. "Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story." "Your soundproofing is terrible." Yelana's chimes grew excited. "Direct communication." This could be the opening phase of psychological warfare. Or, the human continued conversationally, you could try asking questions instead of standing there making assumptions. I've got nowhere else to be. Kethamore consulted his datapad, scrolling through warnings about human deception tactics, their ability to feign cooperation before unleashing devastating violence, and 17 different theories about how their prey species appearance masked their true predatory nature. The Galactic Defense Council had spent considerable resources developing these profiles after the first human mercenary companies appeared in the Outer Rim. "Very well," Kethamore activated the comm system. "State your designation." "Call me Quinn." The human leaned back in the chair with practiced ease. "And before you ask, no, I'm not going to tell you my ship's location, my employer's identity, or where I hid the data chip. Basic mercenary etiquette." "We are not interested in your criminal activities," Yelana interjected, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. "We wish to understand your species' combat capabilities." Quinn raised one of those mobile facial hair patches that humans used for non-verbal communication. "My combat capabilities? I'm flattered, but I'm really more of a technical specialist these days. If you want a proper warrior, you grabbed the wrong human." Plax nearly vibrated with excitement. "Modesty, a psychological misdirection technique." "Kid, I once spent 3 weeks teaching calculus to a room full of teenagers who thought math was a war crime against their free time. Trust me, if I had hidden psychological warfare techniques, I would have used them." The research team exchanged glances. According to their files, humans were supposedly incapable of functioning in educational environments due to their aggressive territorial nature. Yet this specimen claimed teaching experience. "You're lying," Kethamore stated flatly. "Humans are biologically incapable of extended interaction with juveniles outside their immediate genetic cluster." Quinn's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement if humans were capable of genuine positive emotions. "Where exactly are you getting your information?" "Because I've got news for you. Half of it's probably wrong." The Hegemony Xenobiology Institute has spent decades studying your kind, Yelena said stiffly. Every military encounter, every mercenary action, every instance of human involvement in galactic affairs has been meticulously documented. Ah, Quinn nodded sagely. So you've studied humans exclusively in combat situations and concluded that we're naturally violent. That's like studying Vrexani only during mating season and deciding your entire species consists of homicidal romantics. Kethmore's stalks recoiled. The mating practices of his people were not suitable for casual conversation, and the fact that this human knew enough about Vrexani biology to make such a comparison was deeply unsettling. Our research methodologies are sound, he insisted. Sure they are. Tell me, in all your meticulous documentation, did anyone ever bother asking why humans became mercenaries in the first place? Genetic predisposition toward violence, Plax recited eagerly. Territorial expansion instincts adapted for interstellar warfare. Quinn looked genuinely surprised. Seriously? That's your theory? The human laughed, a sound that made all three researchers tense despite its apparent harmlessness. Most of us are out here because we need the money, not because we enjoy shooting people. Do you have any idea how expensive medical treatment is on the Rim worlds? Medical treatment? Yelena's chimes took on a confused harmony. My kid needed surgery, rare genetic condition, required specialists, cost more than I could make teaching. Quinn's voice carried a note the translators struggled to interpret. So I learned to fix hyperdrives and started hiring out my services. Turns out humans are good at solving problems under pressure, and that translates well to technical work in dangerous places. The research team fell silent. Nowhere in their extensive files was there mention of humans seeking medical care for offspring. According to current xenobiological theory, human young were considered expendable resources, easily replaced and rarely invested in beyond basic survival training. You speak of a child, Kethmore said carefully. This is a deception technique. Why would I lie about having a kid? Look, I know what you people think about humans. Big, scary predators, right? Death machines barely contained by civilization? Quinn settled more comfortably in the chair. The truth is a lot more boring. We're just really stubborn problem solvers who happen to be decent at violence when we absolutely have to be. The battle records, Yelena began, show humans fighting when cornered or when something they care about is threatened. Yeah, we're good at it. We're good at a lot of things when we have to be. Quinn studied each of them through the window. But you want to know the real difference between humans and every other species I've met? We don't give up. Ever. Even when we probably should. Plax was frantically taking notes. Persistence hunting adaptation. More like stubbornness evolution. Quinn's tone remained conversational, almost friendly. My kid used to ask why humans always seemed to end up fixing everyone else's problems. I told them it's because we're too stupid to know when something's impossible. Your offspring, Kethmore found himself asking, despite protocol. What became of them after the medical treatment? Something shifted in Quinn's expression, and for a moment the research team tensed, expecting the legendary human combat transformation. Instead, Quinn smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both predatory and gentle simultaneously. They got better? Grew up smart, way smarter than their old parent. Last I heard, they were working diplomatic channels, trying to prevent wars instead of cleaning up after them. Quinn paused, considering. Funny thing about human children. We don't teach them to be weapons. We teach them to be better than us. The observation lounge fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. 3 of the galaxy's most respected xenobiologists stared at their specimen, realizing that perhaps their fundamental assumptions about humanity might be somewhat incomplete. Outside the station, Proximity alarms began their shrill warning song. Something large and hostile was approaching fast, and the automated defense systems were powering up with the kind of urgency that suggested today was about to become significantly more interesting than anyone had planned. Quinn's head tilted slightly, listening to the distant sounds of organized panic. "Well," he said conversationally, "this should be educational." The Kethvar assault ship materialized from hyperspace like a nightmare someone had welded guns to. Its hull bore the ritual scarification of a dozen conquered worlds, and its weapon ports glowed with the distinctive crimson of harvesting beams. Designed not to kill, but to extract what the Kethvar considered the most valuable resource in the galaxy: concentrated human fury. Commander Rajek stood on his bridge, mandibles clicking in anticipation. The research station's pathetic defenses were already failing, exactly as his intelligence had predicted. Soon he would have what his clan had sought for 3 generations, a living human specimen from which to distill the legendary battle rage that had made their mercenary units so feared. "Target the containment sections," he ordered. "We want the Predator alive and angry." Unfortunately for Rajek, Quinn was neither. Back in the observation lounge, emergency lighting bathed everything in apocalyptic amber, while Kethmore frantically worked his console. "Security protocols are failing across all sectors. The intruders appear to be targeting our detention facilities specifically." "Kethvar Raiders," Yelana identified, her crystalline form chiming discordantly. "They've been hunting human mercenaries for months, though no one knows why." Quinn had stood up from his chair, examining the restraint system with professional interest. "Molecular binding field. Pretty standard stuff. You mind if I borrow this?" Without waiting for an answer, he began dismantling the chair's power coupling with movements that were precise rather than frantic. "Subject is attempting escape," Plax observed with scientific detachment that bordered on clinical shock. "Subject is attempting to help," Quinn corrected, sparks flying, as he bypassed 3 security protocols simultaneously. "Those are Kethvar ships out there, and trust me, you don't want them getting their claws on a human. They have some very unpleasant theories about our biology." The containment field dissolved with a satisfied hum, and Quinn stepped free just as the first explosion rocked the station. Emergency bulkheads began sealing throughout the facility, but the intruders were already inside, moving with the systematic efficiency of practiced organ thieves. "How did you—" Kethmore began. 15 years fixing broken things in dangerous places teaches you a few tricks." Quinn was already examining the emergency equipment locker, selecting items with the casual expertise of someone who'd improvised survival gear from office supplies. "Right now, your main problem isn't me escaping. It's the fact that Kethvar harvesters don't care about collateral damage." A Kethvar hunting pack burst through the lounge entrance, their ceremonial bone armor clicking with each movement. They moved like predators, which they were, but their prey had just become significantly more complicated than anticipated. "The human!" The pack leader's translator rendered his excitement as metallic screeching. "Alive, but wounded." The rage must flow freely. Quinn looked up from the maintenance panel he'd been rewiring and gave the Kethvar a look of mild annoyance. "Yeah, about that. I don't actually do rage. Would righteous indignation work instead?" The lead hunter's confusion lasted exactly long enough for Quinn to complete his improvised electrical circuit. The maintenance panel exploded outward with enough force to send 2 raiders sprawling, while emergency foam began dispensing throughout the chamber at pressure levels normally reserved for hull breaches. "Fascinating," Yelana managed between coughs. "No berserker transformation, but highly effective tactical thinking under pressure." The remaining Kithvar warriors were discovering that combat foam designed for emergency hull repair had some interesting side effects on their respiratory systems. Quinn, meanwhile, had produced a plasma torch from somewhere and was cutting through the observation window with methodical precision. "You're not fighting them," Plax said, his voice muffled by the environmental filters his species automatically deployed during atmospheric contamination. "Fighting is inefficient," Quinn replied, completing a perfect circular cut. The window section fell inward with a satisfying crash. "Fighting means someone might get hurt, and then I'd have to feel bad about it. Much better to make their weapons useless and their position untenable." One of the fallen Kethavar managed to raise his extraction device, a grotesque combination of scanner and surgical implement designed to locate and harvest human adrenal compounds. The beam struck Quinn directly, and every researcher held their breath, waiting for the legendary transformation. Quinn looked down at the device, then at the raider operating it. "That tickles. Are you scanning for adrenaline? Because I've got some bad news about your equipment calibration." The Kethavar's expression of hungry anticipation slowly transformed into something approaching existential crisis. His people had built their entire military philosophy around the assumption that humans were reservoirs of concentrated battle fury, ready to explode into unstoppable violence when properly stimulated. Quinn, meanwhile, was helping Kethmore to his feet with the same calm efficiency he'd shown dismantling the restraints. "Your species has redundant respiratory systems, right? Good. The foam should clear in about 10 minutes. Why are you assisting us?" Kethmore asked, his voice carrying genuine bewilderment. "We imprisoned you, studied you like a laboratory specimen, because you're people, and those guys want to hurt you." Quinn gestured toward the incapacitated raiders with his improvised plasma torch. "It's not complicated." The lead Kethavar hunter managed to clear enough foam from his breathing apparatus to speak. You show no fury, no battle madness. How do your kind achieve their legendary ferocity in combat?" Quinn considered this seriously. "We don't, usually. Most of the humans you've encountered were probably just trying to go home to their families. You kept getting between them and that goal, so they went through you instead of around you. But the reports, the impossible victories against overwhelming odds." "Spite," Quinn said matter-of-factly. "Pure, stubborn spite. Plus, we're really good at breaking things that don't work the way they're supposed to." Another explosion echoed through the station, closer this time. Quinn checked his improvised scanner. Apparently he'd built one from the medical equipment while no one was looking, and frowned. "There are more of them heading this way, and they're bringing heavier equipment. We should relocate to somewhere more defensible." He paused, looking at the three researchers. "Unless you'd prefer I leave you here with your new friends?" Yelana's chimes had shifted to a harmony the translators identified as rueful amusement. "It appears our assumptions about human nature may require significant revision." "Most assumptions do," Quinn agreed, leading them toward the emergency exit he'd somehow identified during the conversation. Reality has a way of being more complicated than theories. As they moved through the station's corridors, dodging both security systems and Kethavar hunting packs, the researchers began to understand that they were witnessing something far more dangerous than human rage, human competence combined with the absolute refusal to abandon people in need. Behind them, more Kethavar ships were arriving, drawn by the promise of harvesting the galaxy's most feared warriors. They were about to learn that the galaxy had been fearing the wrong thing entirely. 3 months before the Kethavar found him, Quinn had been standing in front of a classroom full of refugee children on Epsilon Station, trying to explain orbital mechanics using nothing but a broken holo projector and sheer determination. "The gravitational well doesn't care about your species," he'd told them, watching 12 different alien physiologies attempt to process physics that most adults found challenging. "Mass is mass, acceleration is acceleration. The universe runs on math, not politics. Little Vexti, a hegemony war orphan whose parents had died in the resource conflicts, raised one of her 4 arms tentatively. Teacher Quinn, what if the math is wrong? Then we fix it. That's what math is for, testing our assumptions until we find something that actually works. The memory surfaced as Quinn led the research team through the station's maintenance tunnels, past conduits that hummed with familiar energy signatures. Every space station was basically the same underneath. Life support, power distribution, structural integrity fields. The details changed, but the principles remained constant. Subject displays extensive technical knowledge, Ilana observed, her voice pitched low to avoid detection by the Kethvar search teams above them. This contradicts our behavioral profiles. Your profiles are based on military encounters, Quinn reminded her, checking his improvised scanner for patrol movements. Most humans aren't soldiers. We're teachers, engineers, farmers, artists, people with jobs and families and problems to solve. Kethmore's eye stalks tracked Quinn's movements with scientific fascination. Yet you demonstrate combat-applicable skills. I demonstrate problem-solving skills. Sometimes the problem involves people shooting at you. The truth was more complicated, of course. Quinn's path from classroom to mercenary work hadn't been a straight line. After the diagnosis, after learning that his child needed treatment that would cost more than a teacher's lifetime salary, he'd taken a job on a freight hauler. Just temporary work, he'd told himself, just until the medical bills were manageable. The freight company had been attacked by pirates in the Vega system. Quinn had been the only crew member who knew how to reroute power from the entertainment systems to boost their defense grid. That improvisation had saved 37 lives and earned him a reputation as someone who could make broken things work under impossible circumstances. Word spread. Job offers followed. Each one a little more dangerous, a little more lucrative, a little further from the person he'd planned to be. My kid used to ask why I was always fixing things, he said, bypassing another security lock with practiced ease. I told them it was because broken things were still useful. They just needed someone patient enough to figure out how they were supposed to work. Your offspring accompanied you to combat zones? Plax asked, his young voice carrying disbelief. Stars, no. They stayed on Earth with their grandmother, safe, going to school, learning things that mattered. Quinn's tone carried weight, the translator struggled to interpret. I sent money back for the treatments, video messages when I could. Tried to be present, even when I couldn't be there. He'd recorded hundreds of those messages, explaining homework problems via subspace transmission, reading bedtime stories from the cargo bay of a freighter, teaching chess moves while hyperspace storms raged outside. Other mercenaries thought he was crazy, maintaining that connection across impossible distances. They didn't understand that the connection was the point, that every job, every risk, every compromise was worth it, because somewhere in the Sol system, a brilliant kid was getting the chance to grow up healthy and whole. The tunnel system opened into the station's central hub, where massive viewports showed the ongoing battle between station defenses and Kethvar raiders. The attackers' ships moved with predatory grace, but their tactics were predictable, designed for hunting isolated prey, not for siege warfare. They're not trying to destroy the station, Quinn observed, watching the attack patterns. They're trying to flush out humans specifically. This isn't a raid, it's a harvest operation. Harvest? Kethmore's stalks recoiled in disgust. The Kethvar believe human combat hormones can be weaponized, Yelana explained, her chimes taking on harmonics of revulsion. They've been capturing mercenaries and attempting to extract these compounds for military enhancement. Quinn stopped working on his scanner and turned to stare at the researchers. They're trying to bottle human anger. That's the stupidest thing I've heard since the Centauri Republic decided to tax quantum fluctuations. Their intelligence suggests human berserker states produce biochemical advantages, Plax offered weakly. Their intelligence is wrong. Human berserker states are just panic responses with better marketing. You want to know what makes humans dangerous in combat? We remember what we're fighting for. He gestured toward the viewport, where another wave of Kethvar fighters was approaching. Those pilots out there? They're fighting because their culture tells them to, because they've been convinced that harvesting other species will make them stronger. But humans who fight well? We're usually fighting to protect something. Family, friends, principles, sometimes just the idea that tomorrow might be better than today. And you? Kethmore asked quietly. What do you fight for? Quinn was quiet for a long moment, his hands moving automatically as he continued his work on the improvised defense system he'd been building from spare station components. I fight so my kid doesn't have to. So they can grow up in a galaxy where problems get solved with diplomacy instead of violence, where people like you can study the universe without worrying about raiders, where children can learn math without wondering if their parents will come home. The scanner in his hands chimed softly, indicating completion. It was elegant work, a sensor array that could track Kethvar ships through their stealth fields, built from medical equipment and maintenance tools. The kind of innovation that came not from training or instinct, but from years of making inadequate resources accomplish impossible tasks. Your child, Yelena said carefully. They pursued diplomatic studies? Top of their class at the Interspecies Relations Institute. Full scholarship, too. Turns out being raised by someone who talks to aliens for a living gives you perspective on cross-cultural communication. Quinn's expression softened with unmistakable pride. Last message I got, they were working with the Hegemony Trade Commission, mediating disputes between mining companies and indigenous populations. Preventing conflicts, Kethmore realized, rather than resolving them through violence. Exactly. Turns out the best way to teach someone to solve problems is to show them that every problem has a solution. You just have to be stubborn enough to find it. Above them, the Kethvar forces were regrouping for what appeared to be a final assault. Their ships formed attack formations that spoke of generations of predatory evolution, while their communications chatter revealed growing frustration at their failure to locate any humans displaying the legendary combat fury they'd come to harvest. Quinn checked his improvised weapons one final time, then looked at the three researchers who'd spent their careers studying his species from a distance. Ready for the practical demonstration? The Kethvar commander's final assault began precisely at 0347 station time, which was unfortunate for him since Quinn had spent the previous hour turning the research facility into the galaxy's most educational death trap. It wasn't the dramatic last stand that military historians would later describe in their analyses. There were no heroic charges, no desperate hand-to-hand combat, no moment where human rage finally erupted in a display of primal fury that justified decades of xenobiological speculation. Instead, Quinn had rewired the station's artificial gravity to create localized fields that sent Kethvar boarding parties tumbling through corridors like dice in a cup. He'd programmed the environmental systems to flood selected sections with harmless but incapacitating sedatives. Most impressively, he jury-rigged the communications array to broadcast a continuous loop of his daughter's doctoral thesis on peaceful resolution of resource conflicts in multi-species environments directly into the Kethvar command frequency. "This is psychological warfare," Commander Rajek snarled, trying to block out the calm, measured voice explaining how trade partnerships could be more profitable than conquest. "The human seeks to drive us mad with boredom." His tactical officer, meanwhile, was discovering that every door they'd breached led to another corridor filled with precisely calculated obstacles. "Sir, our warriors report that the station layout makes no sense. Passages that should connect instead loop back on themselves. It's as if the entire facility has been restructured. Back in the central hub, Kethamore watched Quinn make final adjustments to what appeared to be a standard maintenance console. How did you accomplish this level of environmental control so quickly? 23 years of dealing with bureaucratic systems taught me that everything is connected to everything else. You just have to find the right connections. Quinn's hands moved with the casual confidence of someone who'd learned to navigate institutional complexity long before he'd encountered alien technology. Plus, most security systems are designed by people who assume attackers will try to break things. They're not prepared for someone who fixes things better than they were before. Dr. Yilana's crystalline structure chimed with something approaching admiration. You've transformed their invasion into a learning experience. Best kind of victory, Quinn agreed. Everyone goes home smarter. The station's main display activated, showing Kethvar ships beginning to retreat as their boarding parties reported increasingly surreal difficulties. Warriors trained for blood and glory were finding themselves trapped in philosophy seminars, their weapons disabled not by superior firepower, but by elegant engineering solutions that left them functionally harmless. Plax was frantically taking notes on everything he'd witnessed. The human displays no elevated stress hormones, no combat stimulants, no berserker biochemistry, yet the tactical effectiveness exceeds all projections. That's because you were measuring the wrong things, Quinn said gently. You looked for anger, but humans who fight well usually aren't angry. We're determined. There's a difference. A final transmission came through from the retreating Kethvar flagship. Commander Rajek's voice, heavy with the kind of philosophical exhaustion that comes from having one's worldview systematically dismantled by a particularly patient undergraduate thesis. Human, the commander said. Your offspring's academic work. It suggests alternatives to our traditional harvesting methods. We require time to consider these concepts. Quinn activated the response channel. Commander, my daughter would be happy to discuss her research with your people. She's currently working with the diplomatic corps on establishing trade relationships that benefit everyone involved. I could arrange an introduction. The channel went quiet for a long moment. Then, this would be acceptable. Perhaps there are more efficient methods than warfare for achieving clan prosperity. After the Kethvar ships vanished into hyperspace, the research station slowly returned to normal operations. Emergency repairs were initiated, damaged systems brought back online, and incident reports filed with the kind of bureaucratic thoroughness that kept the galaxy running, despite regular attempts by various parties to shoot it apart. Quinn found himself back in the observation lounge, no longer a prisoner, but not quite sure what he was instead. The three researchers who'd spent their careers studying humans from a theoretical perspective now faced the uncomfortable prospect of revising several decades of scientific literature. We will need to completely reconstruct our behavioral models, Kethmore admitted, his eye stalks drooping with academic exhaustion. Everything we believed about human aggression patterns appears to be fundamentally flawed. Don't throw it all away, Quinn suggested. Some humans probably do fit your profiles. We're not a uniform species. We've got billions of individuals with different personalities, backgrounds, motivations. The problem was assuming we were all the same. Yelana's chimes had settled into contemplative harmonics. Your child's thesis argues that species diversity should be treated as a resource rather than a threat. This contradicts centuries of xenobiological theory. My child's smarter than centuries of xenobiological theory, Quinn said with unmistakable parental pride. They grew up watching their parent work with dozens of different species, seeing firsthand that cooperation usually produces better results than conflict. Plus, they had the advantage of not being raised on scary stories about alien monsters. 6 months later, Dr. Quinn Chen Valdez, the hyphenated name honored both human and adopted Centauri family traditions, stood before the Galactic Council's emergency session on interspecies relations presenting a comprehensive plan for transforming resource conflicts into collaborative ventures. The assembled diplomats, representing 47 different species, listened with the kind of attention usually reserved for matters of war and peace, which this essentially was. The fundamental error, Chen Valdez explained, their voice carrying across the vast assembly hall, is assuming that competition for resources is inevitable. In most cases, what appears to be scarcity is actually inefficient distribution. Cooperation multiplies available resources rather than dividing them. In the observer's gallery, a certain former teacher turned occasional mercenary watched with the satisfaction of someone who'd spent years preparing for exactly this moment. The kid had grown up brilliant, compassionate, and equipped with the kind of stubborn optimism that could reshape galaxies given sufficient time and opportunity. The fear that had driven alien species to develop elaborate theories about human violence was real enough. But like most fears, it had blinded them to possibilities they'd never considered. While they'd been building weapons to defend against human rage, humanity had been raising a generation that preferred building bridges to building walls. Quinn slipped out of the gallery as his daughter began fielding questions from delegates eager to understand how trade partnerships could replace territorial expansion. There was a freight hauler departing for the Rim Worlds in 3 hours, and someone had sent word that a mining station was having trouble with their environmental systems. Some things, Quinn reflected as he made his way through the corridors of galactic government, never really changed. There were always problems that needed solving, always people who could use help, always broken things that could be fixed with enough patience and the right tools. The only difference was that now, when he sent video messages back home, his kid was usually too busy preventing wars to respond immediately, which was exactly how Quinn had always hoped it would be.